All right, we're going live.
I hope she did good. I've always wanted to try throwing a javelin. They look like they're fun to throw.
I used to throw discus. That was fun.
Look,
You don't throw it at people, you know that, right?
I do know that now.
Oh, okay.
That's why it's like a large field. The idea of just being able to like, just looks kind of cool.
Yeah. Oh, public meeting questions. There we go.
Everything okay, Mr. Johnson?
For 10 tech finance operations. There we go.
No participants.
Okay, Aaron, I am in with you.
Perfect, you're the
And
best.
the owl, our friend the owl, is up. Does he seem to be looking at us? Yes, he does.
He's looking at Maura right now,
How
and
about
the
that?
three of
How
us
about
right
that?
here.
We
It's
are
in the
up.
wrong spot.
Woo!
And is it recording? It is recording, right? It's recording.
It is
Good.
recording, yes. And
then
we're
I
also
need to
live
put
on,
one of these away.
YouTube. Coming
And
live
then-
on HWRSD.
The district office here in Wilbraham, Massachusetts. The time is 4:57 p.m. Ding!
Take your seat, you can put your tray table up and your seat back. The position will now be taken off.
I'm just waiting for my fellow members.
They're coming in the door.
Next time you choose to watch YouTube, please choose our friendly channel.
And do we know how many people watch that, Aaron?
Yes, it tells, the YouTube, it'll say like, we had no views of the last meeting that we just had. There was
Really?
just me. I was the only concurrent viewer, but it doesn't give
I
you
sometimes go watch them
names.
just so there's someone there.
It doesn't give any names. Hello, Mr. Bunting.
Hey, what's happening? How are
Just so
you?
you know, we're actively
Nice to
live
see
and
you.
recording.
Yes, we're
Hi,
live.
Bill. Sorry.
We're
Really like that, I got here on time
We're
too.
live too, on YouTube.
Excuse me, you're early.
Whoops, this is
Actually-
this is the big guy.
2 minutes early.
Yeah.
I was trying to give you credit. That's all.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, sorry.
Greetings, salutations.
Sean Kennedy, good to see you, and we're live.
Okay.
And we're live.
We're we're live.
Good, how are you?
So we've got agendas and the handout for anyone who, you can pass them around.
Let me get you back in my mouth. Ran away.
There's kind of a handout.
I have one of those. Thank
Okay.
you.
Oh, thanks. This one down, pass it around.
Okay.
Do you need one? There you go.
Please, thank you.
We are up and active on Zoom.
There's an attachment, which you probably already have.
We are not muted.
I have Christina as a panelist. Looks like Christina's
Oh,
on there.
and Christina's on there. Hey, Christina.
She wants to be.
She can't talk. No,
Oh,
I mean, she can come on if
but,
you want her.
okay.
If you want.
I didn't know if you wanted me to promote her to a panelist.
I'm good. I know.
I don't know if that's much of a promotion.
Can I have one of those? Oh,
What's that?
can I have one of those?
Oh, yeah.
Thank you.
It's all of a sudden summer.
Hmm?
It says all of a sudden summer.
I
Yep.
know, huh? This week looks
It's one of those, you know what's hard about
85
this?
some one
Yeah,
day.
you leave your house and you got a down jacket on.
Hello.
Yep.
Still wearing it because
Yeah.
I just didn't want to have to carry it.
And then you get back, you get out and you're like, what was I thinking?
It's crazy.
Well, it was 37 degrees this morning. So it was cold. Like, you know, gotta love New
It was
England.
cold.
37, but you can have frost and cold in the morning and then it's summer and breezy in the afternoon.
What they say, by Friday it's supposed to be 80?
Thursday.
Yeah, it's not like 185 almost, yeah.
Although we shouldn't be too surprised at that, seeing as how I think we hit 80s one day in January, a couple of years ago.
Next week is supposed to switch back though.
The cold?
Well, to
Seasonal.
seasonable, so 60s.
Mm.
You know, 60s and early 70s and I'm okay.
Fine.
Sean has to spread some mulch on Friday. It's gonna be.
That's right. As soon as I get all the mulch spread, it's gonna get cold again.
Yeah.
Trying to make me sweat.
We went to Rocks a couple of years ago, and it's great.
So it's 5:01, let's call the meeting to order. This is the Hingham Wilbraham Regional School District Technology, Finance, and Operations Subcommittee is Monday, April 10th, 2023. Time is 5:01. Could we please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, so, first up, first agenda item is to review the Wilbraham Times article. So, I thought we would have some finance people here, we usually do. I know the invites went out, but we don't have anybody here from finance. Do you want to put this down later on the agenda to see if they come, or do you want to talk about it now?
Well, I know Hamden has their town meeting, the pre-town meeting for the warrants tonight.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that's maybe why Doug and Carol aren't here.
Yeah, I'll tell you more
Here for that.
specific, I was being more specific about Wilbraham.
We did get a decline from Mark Ducey.
Okay. All right, so why don't we go ahead and just talk about this article. So I think you guys are all aware that there was an article in the Wilbraham Times last week. I showed up in my house on Friday. And there's a couple of things in here that I think are worth pointing out. I think number one is it's worth pointing out that we don't have a member of finance here. I'm not sure why Mr. Ducey declined, or Mr. Dufresne. Did we get one to Pete too?
Yeah, you might have.
Okay. So there's a couple of things that I wanted to point out in this. So this is from the Finance Committee that would have been held the previous week. So that would have been, the Finance Committee was held, this meeting was held right after we voted our budget. Our budget was voted on the 24th, which was Thursday night. And so this meeting took place after that. So the first one is that Peter Dufresne expressed disappointment in not having opportunities to discuss how the assessment letter was written. Said, quote, "I'm a little disappointed in the lack of openness and transparency in the way the assessment letter was done." Further down, Mr. Ducey thanked Mr. Provost for providing a detailed list of budget cuts and their impact. However, he stressed collaboration between the finance and the school committees, along with including him in the discussion. And he said, quote, "If they were willing to compromise, I would be willing to make a motion to reopen the school budget. So that way we could come to some sort of collaborative agreement. We're not going to get everything we want. They're not going to get everything they want, but at least we're working together to achieve a common goal." And then Dr. Tirabassi chimed in, asking to meet somewhere in the middle. And basically what I'm getting from the tenor of this article was, Mr. Ducey says, "After I read the superintendent's impact memo, it's apparent to me that the schools will experience currently voted budget are deep and impactful. It also occurs to me that we have capacity in our budget to improve the budget situation, but with that said, the taxpayer cannot bear this gap alone. The school district will need to show good faith in finding additional and meaningful savings in the budget, and a willingness to amend the assessment." I just opened that up for, I know you guys have read it, I just want to sort of pull out the most salient pieces.
Also over here, Jeff Farnsworth explained other town departments did not receive a 20% increase in allocations but experienced cuts. Did we ask for a 20% increase in allocation?
Did we get a 20% allocation?
I don't think we got one.
Hey, we got 2%.
I was wondering where that 20% came from. I got a phone call, a couple phone calls from people who were like, "Are you listening to this meeting?" And I'm like, I'm on daddy duty at the time. I couldn't attend and I couldn't listen. And they said some things that were said. Now I haven't watched the meeting. I would like to get a copy of the meeting. I don't know if it's up yet. I know the last time I looked it was not. So, and then watch the meeting, because I heard there was all kinds of stuff saying, I mean, I have 1, 2, 3, and I gave away a 4th copy of the budget and the different iterations that we've reviewed in this meeting in paper. And, you know, we did get better, we kept sharpening our pencils and finding savings and making cuts. I don't see,
When we first came out with the budget, Aaron, you were at 9%, I believe.
Somewhere between 9 and 10%.
9 and
Yeah.
10%. I believe we got it down to 7 through one of those budget iterations. I think
Yeah.
we were down to 6. I think at one point we were down below. We were at 5. I think we ended up at like 4.54 is where we ended up.
yeah, 7.42.
Yeah.
And then we got it down to,
Thanks for bringing that stuff, Sean.
yeah. I gotta find out where it was here.
So, and what I'm seeing what I've noticed going back is I've been here for every meeting is, I don't think, we never really had a clear number from finance, where it was. It was always basically, stay away from my family. So with finance, it was always like, well, we have a number in mind. But we were never really made privy to that number. I don't think there was ever any discussions about finance going up in
He
what
did
it
say
is.
something about, I thought Mark Ducey did say something, excuse me for interrupting that, he said, of the initial number, he said just to start the conversation, he decided just $1 million over what they gave us last year.
Mhm.
That's where he said, that's where he put it in just
Placeholder.
as a placeholder. And hoping that we would find more cuts and more things that we could do, which we did, but we didn't make up
Well,
several $1 million.
I gotta be honest, I was kind of surprised when we had the school committee meeting that we only were just getting the memo. If anything, we got it like a day or two before. And in the past, when we've tried to talk about like the list of what the potential cuts were, I think that there was some semblance of, we had been asking what that was all along, like could you make cuts, what would those cuts look like? And if we were gonna be good partners with the towns, I would have thought that the letter could have also been shared, well, I appreciate it was shared with the full committee first. I'm always a proponent for that, but I guess it would have been nice to have an overview of like what that could have started to look like. Maybe not the full amount, but some relevance of like where those numbers were coming from, because it never came to this meeting. And so to me, that letter should have also come to the subcommittee level, not just been at the full committee level. Because similar to how things happen, I mean, if it had come out a couple weeks before, we could have had it at a full committee meeting when we had a presentation like the budget roundtable. It would have been nice to have that there, because then you would have had everybody. And again, the numbers may not have been final, but an idea of that. And I believe that's what was asked even at that meeting, like what were those cuts gonna look like? How were we gonna get to those numbers? You know, that, because for, I'd say over a month before that, it was, we're talking with the principals, you know, we're working with the schools, and I understand that. But it's like, okay, so where are you looking, what kind of things, the impact's looking like?
Yeah, I don't, like, this is not, certainly not the first year that we've done this. And there have been times in years past where we've come out with, you know, basically a letter which is very similar to the one that we saw at that meeting. The, you know, as far as the timing, I don't actually know. So when did we have that letter? When did we have that letter ready? Was it I don't even know if it was dated. Probably was. I don't have the letter in front of me. I'll probably pull it up.
I think I have it, right?
I mean, I think some of the challenge stemmed, in terms of giving that letter stemmed from, you know, getting state numbers, right? It came very late.
Yeah. So I don't think there was an intentional effort on anybody's part to obfuscate this until the last minute.
No, but I think that.
I think we were very upfront with both the members of Wilbraham Finance and with Hamden Advisory saying these cuts are gonna hurt. Like this is, and I believe Aaron had said, you know, looking at our budget, literally anything that we do is not going to be a level service budget. Anything that we do is going to involve cuts, and it can be cuts in instruction, it can be cuts at the, you know, at the classroom level, at the administrative level, at the building level, but understand that it will be impactful. So, you know, as far as the timing is concerned, and again, I mean, this is, you know, we have been talking about this for 4 months. So it's not like we just It's not like we just came up with those numbers and, and decided that, you know, this was, I mean, we came up, we were at 9%, and basically for 4 months, I mean, we were the only side that moved, and so when we talk about a negotiation and a collaborative effort, like, I find it a bit ironic that, you know, the initial number that we heard from Wilbraham was $1 million over what we got last year, which is less than the 2% increase. And then we moved from basically 10% to like 4.5%, and we were like cutting everything that we could just to get that number down, and the number that they voted was still $1 million. So I take offense to the fact that it was characterized in the paper that somehow the school committee did nothing to sort of to mitigate the potential damage that a budget like this has done. And also, I thought we did a pretty good job of explaining in the budget presentations that the vast majority, like 90+% of this, we don't have any control over. Like, these are contractual obligations, it's insurance, it's retirements. So it's not like there's a big piece of this that we have the ability to steer. I mean, the ship is headed in a certain direction. I mean, we have very, very little impact in terms of making a course correction. So, and that was the main reason why I brought this up, because unless I missed something in the last 4 months of meetings, I mean.
Well, they did come at the last meeting that we had together with them, and they did say that they wanted to negotiate, and they said that, if I remember, we should close TWB, and then we tried to explain to them that the cost savings of closing it, we can't close the building. You know,
People there have to move
contractually, even if we move someone there, we have to keep the building open.
Right.
Right? And then they also said, as I guess part of the negotiation, that they asked us to look at, I don't know, the different facilities in the different towns to see if maybe our facilities department could be absorbed into their facilities department, or vice versa, or something.
I missed that part of the discussion. 'Cause
Yeah,
I
it was just one of these things that was like, I was like, great, like, what did you have in mind? Well, I don't have anything in mind, we want you to look at it. And it's just like, I'm like, I kind of got the impression that they were like, well, figure it out, guys. You're the school committee, you have to figure it out. We're only gonna give you a certain amount of money, and you have to figure it out.
So we have talked about that in various iterations in the past. I mean, I've been on this committee for 8 years now, so we have talked about that. The messy part about it is that when you start admixing municipal services with regional school services, that's where it gets tricky. Because if you have a plow from Wilbraham that's coming in here and plowing and basically taking hours of a plow truck to clear out this parking lot, then they are essentially providing a service for the regional school district that Hamden is not. Vice versa, if Hamden were to send a town truck here. So for the budgetary implications of that are, you know, so who gets paid what? And the other thing is like, you now have the municipal trucks coming in, and let's say just for snow removal purposes. We also have a contract with the people that normally do our snow removal. We have we have our normal facilities people that clear the snow. So we have talked about that at that particular level. I think the bigger ticket item is, and you know, and I think I had spelled this out at one of the last roundtables, is like you just keep on trimming what we think is fat. We're calling it fat, but now we're trimming into the muscle. And you know, when we're talking about losing teachers, and we're talking about, you know, losing social emotional support for kids, we're talking about losing instructional time for kids. And that's just not. And it's what we've been trying to tell them, and I don't know how else.
And I'm surprised that they're so surprised by how much we went up. Like, for example, the thing I know that there's a project in town in Wilbraham, they're building a senior center, and I guess a couple of years ago we voted on it at $10 million. And from what I heard, now the price is somewhere around $15 million. So those prices have increased 33% in 2 years. Well, our prices have not increased 33% in 2 years. We're asking, yes, instead of a 2 to 2.5%, which historically, as Aaron showed us in that paperwork he passed out to us, that we kept in line on that. But the way that the economy and the inflation and the results of just supply chain and such,
And I think
I'm surprised that they are like so, like, okay guys, we got this down to under 5%. Like, do a backflip, yell hip hip hurrah, and let's fund this and let's go. And then we're gonna pretty much, we're losing some stuff, but we're pretty much gonna keep what's important.
And the things that we've talked about as being important.
Yeah.
And the things that we've stood up for.
But I gotta be honest with you, I feel like being on this committee the last couple of years, there's been more conversations between you and Aaron about some of the budget stuff that I don't fully understand. And so I had a hard time last year with the budget, communicating some stuff about where some of the numbers came from. And in an understanding that the MASC, again, I'm not like, I don't want you to think that I'm accusing anybody of anything. I realize as the chair of finance, you understand and ask a lot more financially driven questions. You're allowed to do that. I'm not saying you can't do that, by all means. But there's often been references during meetings where you'll say, well, I talked to Aaron about this, I talked to Aaron about that, but like, I don't understand what the context of what you talked about, but it somehow is it's part of this meeting. And so I feel like there's gotta be other conversations somewhere being had that we're not talking about. We're eliminating teacher-facing positions. We have a lot of administrative staff positions that could be looked at. We have other expenses within the district that could be looked at. But we don't ever talk about specific budget areas, right? And that's part of what we're allowed to ask the questions and have those conversations. And so I think there is some part of what the towns are asking for is you've now said to them, come have this meeting with us. We want to be very open and transparent. And I feel like we have been, but they have questions and then they don't necessarily get answered. I'm not saying specific to what the newspaper article was. Even I remember there not being the capital requirements on the assessment letter from years ago, and now it's on there. And I know that was one of the things that came up at the meeting. I don't remember if it was Doug who had asked about it, or if it was Mark. But they had asked about, does the capital have to be on the assessment letter? Because it hadn't been, if we're doing it as a separate item as an article. So I don't know if that's, again, I'm asking, I'm not telling, I'm asking.
So when you have questions like that, I would say, because it's hard for me to not know what you don't know. So if I'm talking about something and you don't understand it, please don't think that I'm being like secretive or obfuscative in any way. So when you ask about the capital projects for Minnetonka on the assessment letters in the past,
Yeah.
right? So that's a perfect example, right? Great question to ask, and certainly one that we have not seen that before.
But so I before I wanted to ask the question, I wanted to go back in the notes and
Yeah.
some of the letters, not the letters so much as the presentations that have been posted on the website. I have deep dived into the website for all the previous notes.
Right.
And the way that the presentation we get now, for what we've gotten in the past, different people have done it a different way. We get a lot more information now than we had before. But I just was surprised that that would be included, because now I think we also forget that, we say we can't go back to the well, but there's a small percentage that we could, because each town has a special town meeting in the fall, which is what I brought up at the meeting on Thursday.
Right.
So I'm not saying that we have to do that with things, but there are some expenses that could have not been put on the assessment,
Right.
that could have been looked at. I know,
So
but I
I'll,
also am
he
not
wrote,
done
he wrote
talking.
the, I would say, he wrote the letter, you can answer the
So
question.
the short,
Just,
the short answer.
I didn't interrupt you.
The short answer is that in years past, we didn't really have a collection of capital projects
Mhm.
for this building. As this building has gotten older, now there's a growing list of projects that need to be done. So we had other projects that came up in this building, like the pool heater. But don't forget, this building's only 13 years old, 14 years old. So stuff is starting to break.
Sure.
Right? So in years past, no, we didn't have a separate ask for capital improvements to this building because we didn't really have that many capital improvements to have to do. So this is new territory in that, and that we've never really had that much, so.
I know there was a lot of back and forth and confusion over the switches last year, and I thought we clarified that both the regional agreement and state law both indicate that capital items are part of the assessment,
Okay,
in accordance with what I felt had been requested multiple times
Okay.
in this meeting from members of the FinCom and the advisory, was to split the operating and the capital items out so that they might be able to put
Get
them
approval
as
from
separate
us,
items.
yep.
So if they can't approve the capital, they could at least approve the operating, right? So I wanted to work in accordance with them. Typically, it would be one item, but I felt the school committee vote it is two items. And because of those conversations, it made more sense to try to at least get our operating budget approved,
Sure.
and then we can deal with the capital later. So I apologize if that wasn't clear enough.
no,
but I
that's
thought we
what
had
I
those
thought, but I
conversations
remember there was
last
a
year.
conversation about separating it and how we separate it, and again, you know, I don't know that many
Yep.
districts have what we had, where you have different financial directors over a period of time, and obviously everybody's gonna do it a little differently,
Right.
and so,
But again, keeping in mind that prior to the switch conversation, we've never had capital requests in this building.
Yeah, I'm sure it's been 20 years,
So-
right? The
so we-
last 5 years of.
The last
5 years of
the
building, no
old
one
building.
did anything and.
I-
no
The pool,
one-
well, it
I
was the,
vaguely recall Howie coming to the capital planning in Hamden with a list, and again, that's where that 10-year tally list of what they were gonna do, but then stuff just kinda gets pushed off, you know, because.
It was
Right.
right for the other schools.
right.
No, but that was, it also included Winchog.
Right, but it puts it, and to Aaron's point, I mean, to have a separate list as a separate item in the warrant, I don't think is necessarily a bad thing. Otherwise, what would happen is you would see inflation of this budget by $466,000 or whatever that list of capital requests is. So you see the budget in ballooning another $500,000. So it's, I think this is probably the most transparent way to do it, to say, you know, look, this is the operating budget, these are the capital requests, so we're trying to split those out to, you know, to provide as much transparency as we can,
Okay.
right? So, and as far as other, you know, as far as other parts in the budget, I mean, you know, any specific areas in the budget that people want us to take a deeper dive into, we can. I mean, I think we've talked about administrative staffing at this school versus basically the other dark schools that we're compared with, and I mean, the number of administrators per student, I mean, we're dead lowest. The other districts really
But
aren't
what
that
are you
comparison.
defining as an administrator? You're defining that as an educator?
Whatever you guys define.
That was
There
the
Not
was a
a-
question.
breakout of central office administrators
Yeah.
versus.
Yeah, so you're talking about-
administrators, and if you look at that.
Superintendent, HR, business office, et cetera. So, you know, so, but I guess the bigger question that I had was, I mean, you know, I don't think there's like a big pot of gold lurking under the stairs somewhere that we haven't found. I mean, what we're talking about with budget cuts, I mean, we've said to them, like, we might be able to cut a little bit here and like, you know, 5,000 here or 8,000 here, and it's like, I mean, yes, they are things that we can save money on, but at the same time, it's not going to solve a $2 million shortfall. It's not even gonna be close. And I think the bigger issue, and it's one that I brought up at the last meeting, and I brought it up for several years, is that just the inequity, and it's ironic, because the state of Massachusetts uses the word equity with such freedom and gay, but they don't actually understand, when we look at funding school districts, how inequitable it really is for towns like ours, where we are funding 72% of our education out of assessments. That's insane. I mean, you look at some of the inner city schools, you look at Boston, Springfield, Holyoke, New Bedford, Fall River. You know, these schools, I mean, they're just at minimum, you know, their minimum local contribution. Not a penny over. And yet those are the same schools that are pulling out the most money out of the Student Opportunity Act. So you get 500, how much was the student? Was it 560 million? SOA is like $563 million, and the statistics were that of that 563, 2/3 of that money goes to 100 districts in the state, and of those 100 districts, 10 school districts get 75% of that money, and we get 0. And so as we look into the budget cycle for next year, and I've been saying this for the last 5 years, since since Mr. Barber was here and Sean and I basically sat down and helped rewrite the format of how we do the presentation at town meeting to understand that these are our mandated cost increases and this is how much increase in revenue we have. The delta is, and it keeps growing every year.
Yeah.
It was started out as $1 million, $1.2 million, $1.5 million when we got to Howie, $1.8 million, now it's 2.2 million. That number's just gonna keep going up, and so the question is not, what are we gonna cut this year? The question is what could you possibly cut before you start cutting teachers and positions? I mean, we have ways in which we can save money, absolutely. Building utilization is one. But that's gonna solve the problem for this year. But we're gonna end up with another $2 million shortfall for next year. We don't have enough increases in revenue to even be close to keeping up with the increases in the cost of providing education. I mean, special education alone was a $500,000 out of our budget.
And again, you fall square on the shoulders of the state that they're pitting the town against the towns against the school committee and the school committee against the towns.
And the
Because
school
we have a
committee against the
budget-
finance committee.
And against the finance committee, right? That we, you know, this is the budget that we need, and then, sorry, we can't give you that money. They've been very generous, don't get me wrong. And, oh, by the way, I want to correct myself. I said that from going from 10 million to 15 million was a 33% increase. That was a 50% increase.
Yes.
50% increase. And you know, I get it.
It
happens.
I would love nothing more than to be able, you think I want this to be contentious? I mean,
No.
I would love nothing more to be able to reach a reasonable settlement on this. But the number I heard, I said they were gonna come up to 1.3. And I believe the gap that we were looking at was $800,000, right? And we've ended up with a little bit more money. I know we got that $60,000 grant. And it was that part, I think that was,
That doesn't offset the budget.
it doesn't.
I was gonna say that
Beyond.
Was that
It's
a-
services
Yeah.
beyond.
Okay, all right, so basically, we haven't really moved. So meeting in the middle is 400,000, all right?
So help me understand what these numbers look like. So what are we, and again, it's not just for me, but anybody who may be listening. So we know what our budget is based off of what it was. What is the actual number for what we're short? Is it 800,000? Is it $2
Yes.
million? So there's a lot of numbers that get thrown around, and it's hard to I'm just trying to listen to what you're saying now. And at 1 minute it was 2 million, now it's 800,000. And so the 800,000 that we have to make up, does that include the 1.3 potentially from the town of Wilbraham? Or just the 1 million from Wilbraham?
No,
The
1 million.
other than just the 1 million from.
So if Hamden and Wilbraham, based on our budget, the way it's set up right now,
Yep.
if Hamden and Wilbraham gave the full contribution, we still have an $800,000 gap to
Okay.
fill. But Wilbraham is did Hamden vote their,
I have-
did Hamden vote their, I don't think they did
No, we
yet.
haven't had it
I
yet.
think they did. But I mean, Wilbraham, I mean.
No, because we have the
It's-
town meeting
oh.
warrant thing tonight, so it'll be next week, I think? Isn't it the week before they have the town meeting?
You guys would have had to vote it before though, because your town meeting is just a few days before or after ours.
I don't necessarily know that that matters, I think they wait till the town meeting to do it.
Alright.
I could be
Whatever.
wrong.
So based on the numbers, because I mean, Wilbraham's.
Do you know? Oh, sorry, he's not here.
Because Wilbraham shares such a
Yeah.
large piece of
But
this.
I know that should it be the 1 million, should it be the 1.3, Wilbraham had in their budget to be able to meet whatever our percentage was. You know what I mean, what the assessment value would be.
Hamden.
I'm sorry, Hamden could meet
Yes.
whatever.
Wilbraham, yes.
If Wilbraham did 1 million, we would do our portion of that 20%, you know what I mean, of whatever the amount
Correct,
was.
correct.
If they could go up, we could go up, we could meet it, there wasn't gonna be an issue there.
Right. So the sticking point is, like I said, we still are, with the $1 million, the 1.9% that Wilbraham has voted for the school budget, we are still 800,000 short.
Has there been any headway, Aaron, with the Ways and Means Committee of any budget money coming from the cherry sheets?
No, not yet. The Ways and Means is supposed to have their next budget out Wednesday. So there's the potential that Thursday morning, we could have new cherry sheets, Thursday, Friday.
Okay. Thank you.
Have you heard any rumblings that this might happen?
Do I have to call anybody? Is that
Not a
question?
lot. John shared with me, but you can go ahead, John.
Sure, so I've heard that House Ways and Means is coming out on Wednesday, that it's gonna protect 75% reimbursement for circuit breaker and transportation. I wanna take a look at that number to see if that in fact is the case. I really don't understand our regional transportation reimbursement number at this point, because that's allegedly supported at 90%. However, it was actually about $100,000 less on the cherry sheet for next year than it was for
So
this
maybe it was
year.
maybe 90% of whatever
We've
the one
increased what
last
we
year was?
budgeted.
Right. What's that?
Maybe they were gonna just fund 90% of whatever they gave us last year?
You increase what
Instead of?
you increase what you budgeted, just.
Yeah, I did increase what we
Yeah.
budgeted in, I believe that it is gonna be higher, but the final number is come out.
So
It's
those
gonna
are
be
the
higher,
things-
meaning that we won't
So
have.
You've already
So-
taken that into account, is what you're saying?
Yeah, so they don't, yeah, so we've already taken into account that it will be higher than we expect. So the actual number that we get for fiscal '24 is not going to be determined until we finish fiscal '23.
Mhm.
So what Desi puts in the cherry sheets is a conservative estimate. This year's conservative estimate is very clearly much more conservative than they've done in the past, because it's clearly lower, I mean, and on a percentage basis. But that's, you know, I did speak with Desi, and they were pretty clear that they're being conservative, so they took it at a 75% level, so mine, based on fiscal '22 numbers. So, you know, my goal was to at least bring it up to meet in the middle, right? Because we don't know exactly where it's going to land. Based on a lot of the bus consolidations and things like that this year, we may end up with a lower total number at the end of this year than we anticipated. So I don't wanna assume for a full 90% of last year. It might be that if our transportation is lower, we get 90% of a lower number. But I can still, with confidence, project it is going to be what we budgeted, right? In the past, when we budgeted that number based on cherry sheets and it came in higher, all that would happen is that money flows into E&D and then we have more E&D. So by taking that number up, right, we will likely have less money flowing into E&D at the end of a given year, which then becomes a separate challenge, but at the moment, we need to fund the current budget, right?
Okay.
So,
It's just
you know,
crazy
it
how they-
impacts the amount of money we have to potentially put into savings, right? And as an individual, you spend all your money for the month, right, and then maybe you have $10 to throw into savings, maybe 5 to throw in your kid's college account. That's really what E&D is. We just reconcile everything at the end of the year and what's left over. If we happen to get a little bit more of one area than we expected, or we spend a little less, that flows into our E&D.
So could there be the possibility of using more of the E&D to offset the budget next year, to help with that?
You could, but we're already cutting pretty deep. I mean, we've upped D&D significantly the past couple of years.
850 this year.
Yeah, it was 950
Last
last year, so we took almost $1 million last
So,
year.
and the only reason why I'm really reluctant to do that is. it's
No, and I
bef-
understand, I was just trying to ask if
It's
we
bef-
had to.
Yeah, it's before my time, but for people who, you know, may be completely bored in their life and watching this telecast, I think it was back in 2009 when the Patrick administration basically issued a set of 9C cuts, and it just gutted the school districts across the state. And we literally like drained E&D just to be able to pick up the slack. So, you know, E&D is there, that's your rainy day fund, that is your contingency account. What are some other things that can happen? Well, I remember several years ago when the elevator at the middle school went out, and it was a couple $100,000. Well, you know, that's a capital appropriation from the town, but it's June, right? I mean, pretty much everybody's out for the summer, you know, we haven't really done much with that, but we gotta pay the elevator people to make sure that we get that elevator done by September. So those expenses, like having that money in that is not just like, you know, we're not just like wringing our hands and thinking of, you know, how we can grow that account. There are actually some expenses that do come forward that we need to be able to cover and cover immediately, so it's cash at hand for us.
I understand when people say, you know, meet in the middle, go for the low-hanging fruit, all this other stuff, but it's so hard when we don't know how much money we're gonna get.
No,
We're trying to plan a budget for our children, where we have costs that are we know what our costs are for this year, we pretty much know what our costs are for next year, but we don't know what this new administration is going to give us, and then what shortfalls that, you know, that the towns are, I mean, we have an idea, and, you know, I guess Aaron has that crystal ball that he looks into to try to figure out, you know, what's Desi gonna do now? What's the Ways and Means gonna do now? What's, you know, are any unfunded mandates coming our way? It is a challenge, and it's a wonderful challenge. It's exciting. It's really interesting. We really have to get into everything.
What are you talking about? It's like running through a fun house. Are you kidding me? You get a pie in the face. Once you wipe your eyes off, you take 2 steps, somebody's throwing a chair at your feet. You get the chair out of the way, somebody's punching you in the stomach. I mean, this is, like, to me, for a state that touts itself on leading the nation in education, I find this absolutely grotesque. That this is the means by which we fund education, is we're like literally like just scraping things off of rocks and trying to have bake sales. I mean, if Massachusetts does truly believe that it is a leader nationwide in education, then it should have a reasonable mechanism to fund schools within the district so that we're not having these inane discussions every single year about how to close a $2 million gap. I mean, it's just, I don't know what else to tell you. I mean, it would be laughable if it weren't so sad. But the state of affairs that we have in our Commonwealth right now is that if you are a school district west of the 495 Beltway, other than being an urban district, you are getting little to nothing. You get no help, and the taxpayers of those towns are literally just footing the bill. And like I said, all you have to do is look at the split on the SOA funding, and it says all that you need to know. So, I don't know. I mean, I'd like to see where the squeal point on Wilbraham is. You know, I don't like the idea of dipping into E&D. Like I said, 850 out of E&D. Where's our E&D right now? It's like 1.4,
1.5 right now.
So we're taking more than 50% of our E&D. So that's going to leave us with like 550 in E&D. So I'd like to see where they came in. Now, according to Mr. Ducey when he was here, because we were. I had talked to somebody on the finance committee with regards to our initial budget asks, and I think there was some confusion in the conversation, but I know that Mr. Ducey was pretty clear here that the town does have the ability to raise another million or so before we reach the levy limit.
Yeah,
so I know that there's a capacity. It means increased taxes to the people of this town, but it doesn't require an override. And that's, unless I'm mistaken, I believe that's what he said. Aaron, is that what you understood?
And that's what I think I understood.
Yeah, John, is that what you understood?
But he also said, he did say that, but then he also did say that he does not think that the appetite exists in this town for that increase.
Because the taxes are so high.
Yeah.
Because it was like 1 million over the last 10 to 15 years, I think is what he said at the meeting.
It's not,
He was here or something.
well, we went down last year.
Yeah.
The tax rate in Wilbraham decreased.
Yeah.
So, you know, again, I don't think there's ever, like, listen, I would love to not pay taxes. I mean, it would be the
So
greatest
would
thing in
I.
the world, you know, if I didn't have to pay taxes. But, I mean, public education is really the one responsibility that every community has. And no matter what, you can't get away from it. And it's a money loser.
Yes, no, but it's not just that. Public education ties into everything. When you have good public education in the town, crime is down,
Yeah.
right? So that you don't have as much strain on the police department, stuff like, it's a whole web of what having a good education means to the town, and it touches everything, which is why
And I
it's
think
the majority of our budget.
And I think most
Town budget.
importantly is, and, you know, Aaron does a fine job of illustrating it when you pull up those Zillow ads. You know, nobody moves to a town and goes, what's the senior center like? And everybody, they don't care, like, what are your roads like?
But that may not be true. I mean, because I know that Hamden has had seniors move in because they like the senior center, they like the community, they like the charm of the town. That's why we have a mix
But
of
that's,
who is moving into town.
yeah, well, I don't,
I just don't think it's fair to say that people aren't doing that. You may not know of anyone, but I do know people who are looking at towns to be in because of what they offer and the charm of the town.
so I would counter that in saying that if that is indeed the carrot at the end of the stick, then the path that that is taking us on is leading us to an even worse situation.
Well, I mean, but look at the percentage of where we are with enrollment, right, between the two towns.
So
We have a
what,
higher population of folks that don't have school-age children. I think it's starting to shift. It has started to shift a little bit just after, like, where COVID started. Because I think people are now, some folks are retiring, they're moving out of town, they're having their kids that are taking over their homes, so they can be in a good school district. Because the cost of houses right now, anywhere you go in New England, is ridiculous.
Mhm.
Absolutely ridiculous.
Oh, no.
And then with the interest rates going up, it's gonna impact that even more. To try to get someone who has children, I mean, you all know by having kids how expensive that is. And then tackle that with a mortgage on top of it, and then the town taxes.
Well, actually, you know what, you had just said yourself that people taking over their family homes so they can have their kids grow up in a good school district.
A lot of people are, exactly,
Right,
but that's,
yeah, yeah.
but what the district was when those folks that graduated from Minnetonka 10, 20, 30, 40 years ago is a lot different than where we're at now. Education is different, the whole picture and the portrait of how they do education
but the
is much different.
But the demographics are different too, so if you talk to a lot of people, so I have the opportunity to see a unique cross-section of people in Western Massachusetts. And I know a lot of families that I talk to them and I'm like, they're like, where do you live? I say, Wilbraham, and go, oh, your kids go to Minnetonka? I'm like, yeah, and they're like, great school district. I'm like, your kids went there? I'm like, where do you live? And they're like, oh no, we moved out once the kids were out of school. And that was what I understood was the trend in Hampton and Wilbraham is that you moved into the district because it was such an attractive school district and it was so good. But the tax burden was high, and so when people were done educating their children, then they moved out. And I think the demographics are interesting because it doesn't just have to do with the fact that we have seniors that are staying. We have, I mean, thank God for advances in medicine. Seniors are living longer and they're living healthier.
Yeah.
So they are staying in their homes longer. The other part of the equation is just that families are choosing to have fewer children. And so you don't have households with 5, 6 kids. You have households with 1 or 2. And so for each household that has school-aged children, there may only be 1 or 2.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of things that play into that. But be that as it may, I mean, we're trying to keep the school district from sinking. And so I think one of the best ways we can do that is to try to find a way to grow the school district by bringing in good families who value a great education. And it's just, as I said, I mean, it's what's going to attract those people to your community. So are there people out there looking for a place to live that has a great senior center? I've never heard of it, but I'm sure there is. I'm sure that people want to move in because, for any number of reasons. But I think
I'm excited about the senior center. And I'm gonna be old enough soon where I'm gonna be able to attend the senior center.
But the vast majority of families, when they move into an area, they are looking at,
But I look at the two different towns, the difference in them is, there's a long historic value of families in Hamden, where it's generational families that have lived in the same houses, on the same properties, and families have taken it over. So they continue to live in the town. So whether the home stays within the family, they're not leaving. And so there are also people who are moving in with a parent. That whole thing about the baby boomer generation, those baby boomers did a great job of raising their children, but then their children come back. They're coming home and they're coming back home to live and grow their families here too. So that may not be the case in Wilbraham, but it's certainly not a difference. I mean, I think Don Davenport said it great at one of the other at one of the other town select board meetings we had, that we have been at like 5,000 or somewhere within that number for the last 10 or 20 years. Like, it's not been a shoot up to some 10,000 to where like Wilbraham is. We just kind of hover at the same like level of the number of people in the community.
Yeah. I think this probably goes a little bit, this conversation probably ranges a little bit beyond the budget, but it's a fascinating discussion because I think it brings in a whole host of other discussions as far as, how demographics really have implicated, how they've impacted negatively school districts in the western part of the state. And you know, the bottom line is that the net sum of all of those things is that we have less kids and we are not getting any help from the state and we are paying so much more for them. And even just in terms of the educational services, I mean, take 20 years ago, what your special ed costs and requirements were based on relative to today. I mean, it's ballooned. And so, and again, what makes it worse is, you know, it's like, you know, remember Wimpy from Popeye?
Yeah.
Why'd you pay Tuesday for a hamburger today? You know, and it's like, we have to shell out all that money up front for all of these costs, and then you get reimbursed on the back end. You don't even get 100% of your money. You know, it's just like, we'll give you 75%. Like, the system is broken.
So how does it work at the town meeting if the budget goes to the town meeting and someone on the floor determines they wanna try to change? Even though the school committee voted on a budget and someone says, hey, and it may not even be able to happen, but, we think the operating budget should be one amount and the capital plan, we should support these 2 things versus all 5 things.
I
Just
know there
hypothetical.
are a lot of questions about that, so I've asked Sean to develop an advisory memo for the school committee, so.
I thought it was
Because
they
there
either
was a
recommend
desire
or they
at the
don't
meeting
recommend, right?
Then when we were voting to separately to decide if we should vote on them individually to say which should have been put on the assessment letter, as I guess maybe what should have happened. Because I could see where some of those, we could have asked for them in the assessment and some other items. We could have looked to see if we could have funded someplace else, maybe ask for it later on at another special town meeting, because we both have them. And not doing it for the budget.
Wait, say it again? I'm
So,
sorry.
I was trying to find the presentation that he had where it had the assessments. I think I just found it.
I think what I don't wanna say what you mean, but, let's also point out that there's $3 million worth of assessments that keep on getting kicked down the road that came onto this year as being $3 million. And of that $3 million, we're kicking off to next year $3 million, right?
Is that, you mean on capital items?
Yes, right?
Maybe district-wide, not just on
District-wide.
one shot. So the
Right.
item that goes to the assessment, the towns pick up the individual, elementary and middle
Yeah.
school. The 9 through 12 is the only regionalized, or if there was something for the district.
Right.
That's truly regionalized for that piece. But by law and by the regional agreement, all capital costs have to be part of the assessment. So there was no, we had no understanding from the towns that we'll pay for this some other way, right?
No, and so that's where I
So it
think,
has to be on the assessments by law.
so that's where I think there was either someone may have thought they said something out loud to say, hey, we realize that there's 5 items on the assessment. This meeting collectively with both finances, the areas, could have said, hey, instead of putting all 5, could we all agree that maybe we'll list 2, the 2 most critical ones? That'll give us time now, knowing we have these additional ones, to find funding, so that when the special town meeting comes along, there's no surprise that the town can say, the district came back and say.
That was discussed at the school committee meeting when you voted the budget.
Yep, no, I understand
The decision to
that.
keep them all together was made. Okay.
No.
Yeah, I mean, if I had been asked, if we'd done individual votes on each item, I would have lined those out.
We wanted to do that, but someone had already made a motion to
Yeah.
accept them as
But
they
if
were.
if we did do that, and let's say Wilbraham votes and says we're gonna accept number 1, 3, and 5, and Hamden votes says that we're gonna do 2 and 4, then nothing gets funded.
That's not true, because if they voted, I have a feeling that there would have been some that would have been voted over others.
No, but he's saying hypothetically.
Yep, no, I
So you
realize
need
that
both,
now.
so you would need both
Yeah.
towns to vote on both,
The
in the
same
affirmative
ones.
on
Yeah.
both
Right.
articles on the warrant. So,
Arguably, though, the towns are just voting an amount, they're not necessarily voting what it's for.
correct.
So if the school committee wished to reallocate those funds, right, so if they both agreed to a different amount, you could reallocate to it. So if neither town wanted to do the railing, right, and they voted to take the railing out effectively, both towns, the school committee could then determine the railing's a priority, we're gonna not do this, but we're gonna do the railing,
Right.
right? So it's an amount, how the school committee chooses to use those funds.
There is a lot, just a little pushback here, but there is a lot that we need to do, especially if you drive in the, Sewell Road parking lot, There's so much that needs to be done at the school just to get the buildings up to where they need to be. And the cost is astronomical. And it's just to the point where we have, I believe, was it 3 million, 5 million, something like that?
Probably in that.
In that ballpark, that this year that we looked at and we said, yes, all of these things are critical, they all need to be done, but we cannot go to the town and say, we need this $3, $4, $5 million. When we came up with the ones that we put but we put in this together with the budget, it was because those are the ones that were the most critical.
Well, just a clarification on that, since you brought up Sewell as an example, that actually was requested through different means. Because that went through the town's capital process. The only capital things that are included in the assessments were the capital
the
for
ones for
this
the-
building.
For this one,
Yeah.
okay.
That's what I was saying at the top of the discussion is that it's unique because
Right.
this is really, we're now seeing the needs of this building. So understanding that this building is owned by the district.
But even the mini split units being put in, I mean, it was even said by the gentleman from the facilities, and Aaron even clarified that if they're needed, they put them in. So whether we vote that amount of money, I mean, and now to know that if we're voting, thinking the money will be used for one of these 5 things,
So-
I'm just saying that I feel like,
So E&D,
yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
if we have a need to put a mini split in, whether or not we have that, we have to take money out of our operating budget to pay for that.
Mhm.
So that's what I'm saying, is that there's a lot of things that happen in the course of a year. I mean, think about your own household, right? If you sit down and you try to come up with a budget, and think about all the extra things that pop up into your budget.
Yep.
Right? So the fact that it gets done is irrespective of what happens in the budget. Because, yes, we want to have those things listed because we want to be able to itemize those. But if we don't have them listed in the budget and there's a requirement to put that in.
Right, so
What's
we don't maintain things. I mean, we do things to find the money to do the mini splits if we have to.
That's my point.
In some past years, what we would do is we would wait until all the money shook out at the end of the year, and if we had excess funds, we would do it. But you'll recall, the other year, there was a big concern with that, right? With using end-of-year funds that we happen to have available to do some things, and you'll recall there was some upsetness at doing that when I tried to be transparent about that. And so we are not doing that anymore. I will not do that because that's clearly not what the town's wish done.
I get it, every year it's something different, so I totally understand that.
So
Last year,
you
it
know,
was
But it's like, I mean, I kind of feel like the wireless access points and the camera system upgrades, when we had the representatives here for the first roundtable and they talked about if there's things you want, I don't know that I agree with sending a letter with a list of all of the items that we needed, because we all know what we need. But I think there were some items that could arguably be asked for and supported at the state level for safety and technology access. Because if there's one thing COVID brought to the forefront was the fact that there was such an inequity of kids having access to wireless, to even just having internet at home, the access in buildings, that they were creating money and ways to help earmark funds for that.
So one of the things that I would, again, caution us about is that, for any of these capital improvement projects that we kick until the following year, I would look no further than the capital improvement list for all of our school buildings and to understand that these deferred projects, they eventually pile up. So the fact that we're saying, well, we won't do that this year, it may serve a short-term relief, but eventually, like, when we go around the next budget cycle, it's gonna be right back on our laps again,
But
only
I'm
a
not
year
saying to
older.
kick, my comment even Thursday about kicking it off and saying we're not going to, it was saying, okay, here's the operating budget for next year, here are the capital items from the assessment. Which ones could we say, yes, we could fund, that would be funded through the operational budget, at the town meeting? And then we could go back and look to see where we fall after the governor's budget gets finally approved. And if we went back, we said, okay, we really need these other 3 items, there's another town meeting in the fall that can be called to say the school would like these items.
So I think, Aaron, correct me if I'm wrong, so when we set the operating budget, like we're budgeting for everything that we need. The reason why that capital list exists separately is because we don't have that in the assessments, correct?
Well, I mean, capital is supposed to be part of assessments. The reality is, one of the things I think that is good about separating it out, which is what we did, you know, I mean, it's 6 1/2 dozen of the other. In some ways, the money that the towns give to the school committee, regardless, is the school committees to disperse as they see fit. But splitting it out, the operating budget tends to grow in a relatively linear fashion, right? We're gonna know it's gonna grow by a few percent a year, right? And we're gonna occasionally have a year like this year, which is, you know, 5%, right? We're gonna have a big year. But capital can be very erratic, right? So if we were to pull that into the operating budget, include it as part of operations, people would be seeing this budget that's all over the place year to year. So I think having people understand which are the capital items, and to the point somewhat of the towns, as a school district, we don't care how the towns get the money, right?
No, I understand.
Aside from
Yeah.
clearly illicit means,
But I
I'm
think
not
sometimes it's a
concerned
matter
with how
of,
the towns get the
do we
money.
pay you in June,
Right.
you know, in June,
To-
or can we pay you in October?
Just to finish what I was saying
Sorry.
is, some of the towns have expressed that they have money that's specifically earmarked for capital, right? And they have money that's specifically earmarked for operations. You'll recall in the past, we were asked to pull some items that we could call capital items, right? One-time costs, right? So those capital items are those sort of one-time, even though we know they're gonna come back every year, but they're gonna be changed from year to year, and there might be some give and take on what we fund, right? So we've cited doors and windows, and that's part of Sean's $3 million. But those doors and windows, yes, can we survive another year with the same doors and windows? Yeah, we probably can. We're low in heat and energy. At some point, it's gonna catch up to us, and we are gonna need to replace some doors, because they're just gonna rot away. So can we may be able to kick down the road, and especially since MSBA didn't fund those sorts of projects this year, it probably makes sense to kick that can down the road if we can. But again, to the point, it's gonna catch up to us, right? At some point.
Well, that's what happened to Old Minichog,
Yeah.
right?
That's
They
right.
kept on kicking all the improvements down the line, and oh, we can't afford it, and then suddenly the school's falling apart, we need a new school, and then, you know,
It's a
that's the
sad,
whole.
yeah, it's a sad commentary on the way the strategy works, because basically, the more decrepit your building is, the more likely you are to be approved for a core
Oh, yeah.
project with the MSBA.
Which is like, so you're basically just letting it go to neutral garbage.
Which is what East Long Meadow have been going through, because East Long Meadow have been keeping up their high school like really, you know, really nice, and trying to do the best they can, so every year they apply to get a new high school, and every year they get denied. You know, so, again, it's just, it's unfortunate the way the system works, because if you're responsible, you get punished. If you're irresponsible, you get rewarded. However that works. But
I do have I would have thought that with everything in here, where in this letter, the article, I mean, where they said that they would be willing to open and are we gonna consider, I would have thought that finance, you know, Wilbraham Finance would have sent some representative here to have this discussion. What do you think the reason is that there is no one here from finance?
I was expecting to come in here and they were gonna be here, so. I don't know.
Yeah, I was too.
I was too.
Because that was the whole purpose of me changing my meeting,
Yeah,
so that we could have,
Yeah,
because to me,
yeah.
the budget is, this is a really important discussion, and has way more impact than policy at the moment.
Now, I will say the movement to 1.3 million from 1 million, I mean, that's a 33% increase from
Yeah, yeah.
their ask, right? So, you know, I'm not gonna sneeze at that, Yes.
Arguably, have both towns waived the 45-day rule? So, I mean, we're within 45 days at this point, so I don't know as though there's
So I think
a legal
what-
way to do so.
I don't know the answer, remember, I was asking you about that the other day, and I don't know the answer to that, and I think that's why I said, talk to Sean, because I don't know exactly how that works. I'm assuming that you can make a motion to amend from the floor.
So something
I don't.
happened, Doug was sort of telling me something, I don't fully understand a lot of it, but you can do it on the floor, but then there's like a process and it's not fun. I'm not saying that any of this is fun, but it does impact 30 days after the votes and it creates it's like a domino effect, I think, of problems. But I'm still trying to figure that out.
There's a very clear process, it is complex, so when you get your memo from Sean, he'll lay it all out for
Do
you.
you know when I'm gonna get this?
I would expect very soon, I would say probably tomorrow or the next day.
Okay.
So as it stands
Thank you.
right now, when the budget comes up, is it going to be our number or is it going to be the town's number?
No, it should be
It's
our
going to
number.
be our number.
Correct.
And then they are going to say, we recommend not to, against,
Finance committee does not recommend.
does not recommend.
Correct.
And then everyone will go up and speak about it and then we will vote on it.
Well,
And if
wait,
it passes,
Well, this is what, I would say, let's not conjecture, because I
I know, I'm
don't-
asking, I'm not
Right,
conjecturing.
that's where we're employing Mr. Sweeney to sort of lay it out for us to make sure, because I don't want to say something in this meeting and then be like, well, we were in the finance meeting and you guys said that, because I don't know for sure, we've never,
Okay.
this is uncharted waters for us, so.
You've already
Last-
gotten in trouble for one meeting saying stuff in the meeting.
Right, exactly, so I'm not gonna say, I'm gonna say, I'm gonna say, let's wait until we get a clear understanding from him. We can distribute it to all members of the school committee so that they have an idea.
Well, I mean, because,
of
I
what
mean,
the
obviously,
process is.
Michelle and I kind of need to know, because we vote first. So we just want to go into it, should anybody have a question? And I mean, I honestly don't think, there might be some questions. The last 2 years we've done meetings, Al never had to give a presentation, because they would just vote on it and they'd say, okay. I mean, and it's not that because it's such a low number, it's just, to us, it impacts Wilbraham more than it does Hampton.
Right. Well, you
Even when
guys
they
had
kinda
negative,
shifted.
you guys had negative assessments for a
Yep.
period of years, so that would,
But again, we never took that lightly, because we knew at some point, when you get to that below 20%, that also impacts us in a different way, so.
what do you mean?
I don't know, Doug was explaining to me that like when you get to less than 20% of the district, say it was like 15,
85?
yeah, or even less than that, the offset, it just impacts us differently. Not in a more, and people would think it's favorable because it's a less amount, but that impacts other things that we get.
Yeah, well, basically, it's, what gets us is it's the percent, right? So as you get to a larger number, even a smaller percent of a larger number is still a big number. So that's really where a lot of this comes in, is that, you know, again, if our budget is $24 million, you know, just the assessments are $24 million, and you have a 1% shift in your student population, that 1% shift is an extra $240,000 that is attributed. So if Wilbraham's assessment goes up $500,000, 240 of that is attributable just to population shift. So that's why as we get, as the differential between the two towns gets more severe, any type of population shift will have a more drastic impact on the town of Wilbraham. And you know, obviously, you know, as you get to, as your denominator grows, then
Wasn't it 75-25 when we started, or roughly in that area?
so 75-25 is where it was when this building was built in 2009. So we've
Okay.
seen a 5+% shift. And
But I thought recently that number really was within the last, so I've been here 7 years, you've been here 8,
it's
right?
been a
Just
pretty
about
even
7
period.
years ago.
Yeah.
Right around 7 years ago, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it started dropping about 7 years.
Yeah,
It's been a
right when
pretty,
we came on, it was right around that
it's right around the time
75, you know, 25, and then it just,
right around the time that you got elected, that everything started falling apart.
second.
Funny, I think so much that you did. Just kidding.
All right, so anything else, anything you guys wanna talk about for next meeting? Hopefully we'll.
So do we have another meeting?
Not yet, I kind of wanna see if anybody
Well, next
hears
week is a holiday, so we
Yeah,
wouldn't
can't
have
do
next week.
Patriots Day, that's Patriots Day. Yeah, so,
Wait,
I'd like to see, you know what I'd really like to do, is let's wait until we get the guidance from Sean,
Mhm.
and then, once we get that, then we can, maybe set up something where we can sit down and talk about, like, the, you know, sort of, what are we looking at in terms of, you know, in terms of the town meeting? Because I think I have a pretty good idea about what it is, but I won't say it. But I also think that, you know, until we have that document from our attorney, I would sort of keep that in between my ears.
just because we have the document from our attorney doesn't mean that's not exactly, does not mean it's what's gonna happen.
But I
No,
feel like
it's-
that could be a fruitful conversation for the full committee at the same time, so I don't necessarily wanna have, if that, by the time that comes out, we
Let's see
may
what
be
it
having a full committee meeting.
let's see what it says, and then, and when you get it, because
Yeah.
if it turns out, because we're not gonna have a meeting next week, right? And then following week is full committee again.
Yeah,
So,
Following week's.
27th.
Yeah, 27th, I'm sorry, you're right.
so the following week would actually be full committee, so we may very well just say, you know what? We'll just discuss it at full committee.
Not that I wanna beat a dead horse, like, you know, we could talk about it that Monday, no one will talk about it again on Thursday, but
No, I think it's a reasonable, it's a
Well, what
very
about the,
reasonable discussion to have.
the resolutions that we wanted to put forth, and do we wanna start working on those, or would do, to MASC, MASS, to that conference? Or is that something we wanna push off a little later, or?
Yeah, I probably, let's get
through the budget.
Yeah.
Cool.
Because I don't think, you don't need those until when, right? You have to, there's a time frame for when you have to submit the form, so given that you're that person, do you have the forms?
No, I didn't get the forms yet, but I'll
Because
reach
it's
out to
usually
get
like the
forms.
booklet
But
has
we
the
do
forms.
have, but we do have, I mean, Glenn Kuchar said that he would be willing to come here and talk to us,
And I think he's coming to one of our meetings, or
Yeah.
whether it's he or someone from the MASC.
someone.
We always
He
have
said-
them for a
He said if
meeting.
we wanna do resolutions, he'd be willing to come here and work with us, so.
Why don't we set that up for, I
May.
really don't,
May.
I'm not,
May?
yeah, I'm really not excited about going into the town meeting without having, I wanna have some sort of strategy, and by strategy, I mean, I wanna know,
What's gonna
like, I
happen.
wanna know that we're on this, I wanna know that us and finance and the select board know what's gonna happen together, so that there's not any surprises. So that would be my goal.
Is
Like
it
I said-
often that your select board and your finance are not on the same page? I say this because I live in Hampton, so they're on the same page, but I can't speak to Wilbraham.
Are our select boards and finance on the same page on this? It seems like they are.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm gonna say, I'm gonna reserve any comment on that. I just wanna make sure that when we go to town meeting, because those are the people that are gonna be sitting in front of the town, and I don't wanna make any of them sitting ducks. I wanna make sure that we know what we're doing with the budget. Unfortunately, we're under a time constraint, right? And I know they are too, but we have to make sure that we get our budget voted. And, you know, I think we were pretty clear in the meeting that I don't wanna see cuts in program. I really don't.
You know, just, again, there's no one here from the finance committee, out of the 7 members of the finance committee, you know, they were all busy and they couldn't come. Or else I'm sure we would have someone here. But I only wonder, like, because if they're not here, that means they don't want to negotiate, because there's no one here to negotiate with, so.
Well, they
Was
couldn't
this-
negotiate with us, honestly, they couldn't negotiate with us anyway, right? So we can have a discussion with them, but if there was some action that they were expecting,
So
they should have
maybe,
come to the Thursday meeting when we had the committee.
so maybe what they were doing is trying to have it so that we would negotiate against ourselves. Is that, because that's what we've been doing all year, is we keep on lowering the ask. I don't know, it's really, I know they're not elected officials, which is another issue. They're appointed, but I do think they you know, they take this as seriously as anyone else, so it's just unfortunate that no one's here.
So, well, let's wait to get the memo from Sean. I think that's probably the best way. Can I get a motion to adjourn?
So
Motion, second,
All those in favor? Aye.
aye.
We are now adjourned. It is 6:10. All right.
Good.
All right.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Hey,